So Keith Jarrett is the #1 piano player who has an influence on my style. The #1 influence on my style is Keith Jarrett. And if you know me, you already know that. If you listen to my street serenades, which, by the way, if this is your first time meeting me, hello, my name is Aaron Hill, and one of many things I am as a piano player. But Keith Jarrett has had a huge impact on my style, even to the point where I had an event recently where someone was in a restaurant and they actually thought that someone was playing the Cone concert. And if you're familiar with that famous concert, then you know that is like one of the most classic concerts. So it was truly an honor and a pleasure. And so I do really feel close to Keith Jarrett. I feel close to his playing. I feel close to his expression. So in this video, I want to do a reaction video where I'm listening to his interview with Doug Watson and just kind of offering my thoughts. So I thank you for watching. And if you're a KJ fan, please by all means drop a line in the comment section. Let me know what you think about what he's saying, or even what I'm saying in response to what he's saying. And yeah, let's have some fun with this. So I'm going to actually share my screen and we're going to get started. Got to get a bunch of stuff out of the way though. All right, here we go. So this is part 1, Doug Watson, Keith Jarrett interview.
You have said that jazz is about ecstasy, connectedness, sensitivity. Is this in keeping with your statement that jazz seems to have lost its soul? Are these 3 essential elements missing in modern day jazz presentations?
Yeah, those 3 things are missing.
Is the state of ecstasy to be felt by the performer, by the listener, or both?
The listener isn't much of a player in that unless he wants to be. So it doesn't depend on the listener. And the other 2 things, connectedness is a big word, and it's meant to include historical connectedness and future, past and future.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in a process, you're connected to all points of that process. And the players now, they definitely are choosing their little... I keep hearing styles and theories when I hear players.
Mm-hmm.
I don't hear sensitivity and connectedness. I hear choice of, I'm going to this corner, then I'll go to that corner for a while, and it's a stylistic flexibility that I don't think anyone in the generation the players I grew up with and my peers who were older, none of those guys were thinking about this. I'm sure Lester Young and anybody I could mention of the greats would say, so what? If you can't listen, then you can't connect. And if you can't listen, then you can't be sensitive. They go hand in hand. That's part of a human being's sensitivity, and certainly a musician better be doing it or nothing's happening. For a good listener, nothing's happening. The only thing that separates a good listener from a bad listener is the sensitivity of the good listener. If he's sensitive, then he might experience something close to what the artist is putting out, or what the artist would hope is received. And if that's an ecstatic state, then the listener will have a chance to feel some of that. But in general, because things have become more related to virtuosity and technical accomplishment in and out of music, our world is, just the age of information itself, it's a meaningless word, information.
People are more impressed by this technology than they are pure musicianship, you think?
They're impressed by things like the production. Things have to be big. They have to be slick. They have to be clever. I mean, CD buyers, they want to buy CDs. If there's only 6 really good things to find out of 6 million, they're still going to go out there and buy something, and they're going to listen to it and say, hey, I guess that's okay. And yeah, that's good. And then when they hear something really good, they're going to say, wow, And if they do that, then that means their ears are still there, and they're being sensitive.
So that was part one of this. Let me see if you all can see me. So that was part one, and essentially what I hear Keith talking about is people's sensitivity to the music, the relationship between the musician or the artist, what they're trying to deliver, and whether the people that are listening are able to grasp it or not, and whether the musician or artist cares if they grasp it or not. I'm not sure when this took place. Let me see if I could take a peek. 1999. Okay. So essentially, there is that kind of relationship between the music and the people, and it's a bit of an interesting scenario, because you could be a musician who has a high level of skill, who really cares about people getting in music.
What do you see as the value of critical writing?
Sorry about that. You could see that it's important for people to understand your music. So you're a really skilled musician, and you're playing to people who either understand your music or they don't, as far as their education level or what their exposure is. And as a musician, it sounds like what he's talking about is a time where musicians and artists were creating from a space that was more about the information that they knew and being technically savvy than connecting with people. And I can really understand that to be the case, because that's the one big thing about Keith that I really feel when I listen to him, is he really connects with people. And I really believe it's because of how much he connects with himself and how much is important for him for the music to be transferable where people can understand it. Now, I'm saying that having little to no conversation, like hearing him talk about that. But in me being a musician and in me knowing what happens when you set intention in a certain way, when you play and you're setting all kinds of intentions, you play in a particular way, and you can hear when a person is trying to be technical just to be technical versus a person who is trying to be relatable. And the way that Keith comes off is always extremely relatable. One of my favorite aspects of Keith Jarrett, and of course if you're a Keith Jarrett fan, then like a true fan, I hate to use that word that way, but I just got to do that this time. Because the moaning and the grunting, that's one of my favorite aspects of him, of his artistry, because I really get it, so to speak. Like, I really understand it. And it's even something that comes out of my playing when I play, where I just get so into the zone. I get so in tune with the sounds that I'm hearing in my head and the moment and how it's just coming through my fingers and coming through my body, that you do kind of get caught up. You really are in like a trance. So yeah, I can really understand what he's saying in his first part. At least the gist I get is where he's talking about the difference between the listener and the kind of listener, whether the person is sensitive enough or has enough exposure or what have you to really understand what the musician or artist is trying to deliver. And then also on the flip side, if the musician or artist has the sensitivity to be able to connect with the listener. So that's what I got out of part one. Let's jump to part two and let's see what they're talking about next. Criticism.
What do you see as the value of critical writing if it is so put as to turn someone off investigating an artist's work?
Well,
you
probably know the answer to that.
I want to know what you have to say.
Well, you have to. It's a kind of magic relationship, I think, that a listener has to have a sort of be in the right state when the decision is made whether to go for something or not, because it cannot depend on on anything but the listener's ears. And I mean, it's like if someone recommends a movie to you, you have to think, who is this person? What else did they recommend? Well, I still don't have anything to go on. Maybe it is worth seeing, even if I didn't trust the other things that were recommended. So if an artist is lucky enough to get reviewed, at least the pot is being stirred somehow. But to have the kind of luck where everyone really knows what an artist is actually doing is too much to ask.
Do you think the best music critics should be musicians who do the writing?
I would say in theory that should be true, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't always turn out to be the best criticism, though.
Orrin Keep News, the noted record producer and critic.
I definitely agree with him on that. And I'm wondering if they're going to go deeper into that. So, essentially, you have people. It's funny because I had a friend recently who just mentioned a story like this. He was a part of an album that was in a magazine, a music magazine, and the review that they got was like not good at all. And this was by a well-known magazine. And his thoughts was, and he's a pretty nice guy, but his thoughts was that it was just like not really cool because they just didn't really do it justice. They actually called the album trash, and he felt like they really misjudged it. And he was on the project, and he's a musician's musician, so he really understands. And as he explained to me, I could understand where he was coming from. It was a particular kind of bias that it was just like, yeah, they're just not really seeing this for what it is. Now, music is subjective, so, that's the one tricky part about it. Music is subjective, so there it is. Nobody's right, nobody's wrong. But at the same time, one of the things I like what they're saying so far, or what Keith just said, is that, when Doug asked, should all the people that are writing, in these publications be be people who are actually musicians? And it's like sometimes it could be a good thing and sometimes not. And that's very true. Because I'll tell you, as a musician and artist myself, one of my favorite things is to listen to people's opinion who don't know dog shit about music. They don't know the first thing about a chord. They don't know the first thing about a scale. They just feel music and they just know what sounds good to them and what doesn't. And a lot of times I like to hear their opinions because it's really unadulterated, and a lot of times it's a particular kind of purity that you can hear in a person like that, in their expression. I see my good friend Nicole is hanging out. So Nicole, I think you definitely appreciate this, and I'm curious what you think about his thoughts too as a musician yourself. But yeah, there's a lot of times when I have to say, probably the older I get and the deeper I go in music, the more I value people's opinion that don't know anything about music. And it's just because of the fact that really kind of what they were saying in the first video, and what I really feel from Keith Jarrett and why he's like my number one influence, is because when I play music now, I come from purely a place of connectivity with my audience. I'm purely coming from a place of expressing musical ideas through my fingers that are relatable. I don't give a shit that I went to Berklee School of Music or that I went to Sheffield Institute for Audio Engineering and I studied music theory, for 2 years. None of that matters. Those are all the ABCs, but the ABCs don't give you poetry. The ABCs, doesn't give you good writing. And so that's the thing that I'm grateful for, is that I'm at the place now where it's most important for me to be relatable. And that's what I get out of Keith's playing, and that's why I really appreciate, sometimes I really, really enjoy, I'll say most times at this point, I really enjoy hearing the perspective of people that don't know anything about music, because they give this natural kind of pure, opinion. And one of the other things I like about it is, since they can't explain things in musical terms, they might explain them in life terms. So they might say something like, your song, the way that it sounded like a beautiful flower just blowing in the wind, or it felt like the art of making love, or it felt like, the tenderness of a baby's, touch or kiss, or, you know, these kind of things. And I really appreciate that because, yeah, for me now, I guess being an older man and musician in general, I'm a person that I speak more in metaphor. I think about life more in metaphors and other experiences. And what allows me to experience the music that I play so deeply is that all of life is speaking to me. So in the midst of the piano song, I'm thinking about the people, especially, okay, so sidebar for anybody that's watching right now. First of all, hello Rosalind, hello Corey, hello Nicole. Thanks for hanging out with me. Drop me a line, let me know how you're doing, and also what you think of these thoughts in this video. For those of you all that don't know, I have a concept called street serenades, and that's where I've been taking my music during the pandemic outside here in my community in the DMV. And for those that don't know, because not everybody knows what the DMV is, that is District of Columbia, Maryland, and Virginia. I've been taking my music outside and around to the communities to share music with people. I've done over 100 experiences, and I'm proud to say it just reached the Baltimore Times, the newspaper article. And if you want to find out more about that or watch those videos, just click on the link that's in the title of this video. I'll put it down at the bottom, and you'll see street serenades. But one of the things about the street serenades is that I'm outside in nature and in the midst of people, and I like to play with my eyes closed. So when I close my eyes, it really feels like I'm scoring, like I'm scoring the music of life's movie. I'm inspired by listening to the train come by, or listen to the people walk by and hearing the fun conversations, or hearing the baby laugh, or hearing a person honk the horn and wave and say, "Hey, haven't seen you in a while." It all impacts me, and I play to that environment. So yeah, relatability is important, and that's also for any musicians or artists listening here. You can do anything you want, but the more relatable you are, the more relatable you are. And so, yeah, that's the thing I like about Keith, and I like what they're speaking about here. So, back to the video.
Wrote an article back in '87 entitled "A Bad Idea Poorly Executed," in which he questions the validity of jazz critics and criticism, in which he writes, "I cannot be dissuaded from a deep conviction that the general performance level among jazz writers is embarrassingly, dangerously low."
Yeah, well, that is true.
What are your thoughts
on the other hand, who do we have? I mean, somebody's got...
I missed what he said there.
Embarrassingly, in which he questions the validity of jazz critics and criticism, in which he writes, "I cannot be dissuaded from a deep conviction that the general performance level among jazz writers is embarrassingly, dangerously low."
Yeah, well, that is true.
What are your thoughts on that?
Writers can't play for shit, in other words, is what they're saying. They're writing and they're explaining their feelings about the music, and they can't play worth shit. And I have to say, to some degree, I can kind of understand it. Again, music is subjective, so even to say somebody can't play worth shit means just it doesn't meet, maybe what I think sounds good to me, what I enjoy. But, for all intents and purposes, though, I mean, it's kind of like, a person who is extremely obese getting you in shape. Now, on one hand, yes, it's just facts. So, you don't have to apply the facts to know the facts. But on another hand, though, there's kind of a deeper experiential understanding of things, and I hate to sound all philosophical, but at the same time, it's really true. There is like another level of understanding that comes along with being like a deep practitioner, and it's something that really can't be overlooked. I mean, I think about it over the course of my life. I've thought about the concept of what it means to know something, and I've come to the conclusion that, knowledge that's not applied is just, these are just hypothetical, so to speak, in many ways. I mean, in some ways, not true. This table is this table, whether I have knowledge that it's a table and out of wood, but in a lot of ways, it really is true. So So I just think about this, and I think about how, yeah, it's just important for people to know that you have to some degree a certain level of ability to even know what you're listening to know how to actually relate to it. But like I said, it's so much gray area, because then again, that's the very thing I love about certain people who are actually non-musicians. I like that they don't know anything, so they express it in other ways, and sometimes it's more pure. I guess it's just that, yeah, you can't have a person who doesn't really know much about music at all writing a publication, because it's not just about feelings, but it's also about information, and it's also about a particular level of education on the subject. And if you suck, then you won't know how to listen. No, I'm just kidding. All right, let's see what else they say here.
On the other hand, who do we have? I mean, somebody's got to be talking, and so often the artists aren't talking, and they're probably smarter not to say any words about their work. I tend to do dangerous things, and one of the things that I do that's dangerous is I talk about music sometimes. And the critics actually hate me for this, because I guess they want that territory. Like, I'm a musician, I should stay over on the left, and the critics they're going to criticize what the musicians do, and they have the right to say whatever they want, but the musicians, it's almost like they're not supposed to say anything. I mean, they can say things as long as they're harmless, like someone might ask, what do you think of so-and-so, and you're supposed to say, oh, he's great, I really love everything he's done. And that's good. Nobody will get in your face about that, but if you say, I don't think there's anything there, then suddenly that's going to be put in large, bold type, as though there's a vendetta against, a personal vendetta that the musician has against some other musician. Critics, I guess they get away with that side because they claim not to be in competition. But then they hang out, they're friendlier to some players than others, so it isn't any different.
I have to say, this kind of tickled me as I was listening to it, because it made me think about when I started my musician hobby first, before it came, to be a career. I was actually a hip hop artist. I was a lyricist, and I was into positive hip hop, and I was with a 3-person group. And so one of the things that I noticed that we would get in the habit of is that we might, someone might share with us their music or their rap or their beat or something like that, and they would ask us what we thought. And we kind of had a dilemma there, if it was something that we didn't like, because on one hand, it was like, you felt the way that you felt, but you didn't want to discourage the person. So in some way, you were kind of like, yeah, man, that's cool, even if you didn't think it was cool, because you just wanted to encourage the person. You knew that we were all at a certain place. So
with the new release, the Melody at Night.
So, relatively speaking, this person, it was cool, because what is cool was all subjective. But on the flip side, you might really feel like, no, this is actually, like, I don't like this at all, and I feel it's trash even, And we would never really say that, because we felt like we were just purely being mean. But at some point, I came to the conclusion where I was like, wait a minute. We're not being mean if we tell the truth. In fact, if anything, if we really care about the person, we would tell the truth, because that could give the person the information they need to possibly change something if they feel the same way, or to have a perspective that just was honest and it was about their growth. I could hear someone sing out of tune and these kind of things, and I just didn't know how to respond to it, because I felt like I was going to be being mean if I told them my truth, that I just thought it was trash. But at some point, things changed for me, and I actually realized the best thing that I could do was to be honest with a person. I didn't have to be mean, but I could say, like, hey, like, this person said, what do you think? I'm like, well, I think that this aspect was cool. I think that you really had a lot of, pitchy areas, and that kind of thing. And I could be like, but I could understand that, especially if this is the case, or maybe you might want to think about, lessons and that kind of thing, vocal lessons. Not that you can't sing, but it's just the truth. Here's the thing: you have a tough time staying on pitch. I mean, people who start cooking have a tough time cooking right the first time. People that play baseball have a really tough time swinging at the ball and hitting it the first time. It's just a skill. You have the potential sometimes. You have at least the baseline. You just need to know how to control it better. Somebody needs to show you, you need help with that. Boom, it's just singing lessons. They're there for a reason, to help you be better. And so I started learning how to tell the truth and still do it in a way where it didn't seem like I was coming off as crass or harsh or mean. And I noticed that people actually appreciated it. I mean, especially if I was like, look, I really care about you. I really think you have some potential. Here's what I would say. It's just some of these right here, you're kind of out of tune. Like you're not in the key of the song. You might not have realized it. I just, to me, truth became the must. And truth was just so important. It would set you free. All right, let's go to video 3. Here we go. See what Keith talking about next. What is Keith talking about? Okay, the melody and Night with You. That's what they're talking about in this segment. Doug Watson.
With the new release, the Melody at Night with You, I've gotten more feedback that was exactly what I myself was feeling than I did for any other recording. And that actually gives me a little hope. Ears are still healthy out there. People are waiting for things that are good. I don't think there'll be ever a time when I don't feel closer to the most recent thing I've done than anything else. I've always felt that way. But this brand new thing, because of the fact that the illness itself made me look at energy in a different way and confront restrictions on that area, I think there will not be a recording that means as much to me as the new one. What happened on this recording was I was given the chance to do something I would never have done had I not gotten a terrible illness. It's chronic fatigue immune dysfunction syndrome, commonly known as chronic fatigue syndrome.
Parasitic in nature, is it?
The protocol I'm using is based on a theory that that is what it is, yeah.
Airborne?
Yep. But the thing is, I knew exactly why it was me. It wasn't mysterious at all. For years for decades, I guess, I had been telling people in interviews how dangerous doing solo concerts actually was. That it was something no one should try to do. They shouldn't imitate this idea. Because it puts you on a cliff, and, I mean, you're putting yourself on a cliff and you're jumping off each time. And the stress involved is amazing. If I was going to get something, if I was going to get an illness that was truly mine, it would probably be this. But the other thing I realized later on, after wondering sometimes why it had to be this way, I would not have recorded the last CD if I hadn't gotten sick. And the last CD I recorded is the most personal thing I'll probably ever manage to do. And someone once said the most personal thing is the most universal. And I've always sort of thought that too. It was a sort of magical thing that happened. And it happened right at my house because I couldn't leave the house, for one thing. And I had my piano work done. I wanted to give my wife a Christmas present. I was feeling well enough to do a few minutes a day. And I spent a long time setting mics up. This thing just happened. This stuff came out. It's almost all the melody. I mean, it's hardly any improvising at all. The manner in which I am playing these melodies and sticking to them is much more related to, let's say, the way a vocalist would sing.
More in a cantabile singing style?
Well, if you can imagine a percussion instrument not being percussive and being liquid, but very dynamic, but within the range of soft, the way a voice can be, without the quick steps from soft to loud. The action that I had customized on this instrument made it possible for me to play as though it was a voice. So I don't need to improvise because there's so much in the melodies themselves, and I'm getting enough out of it, and we have no echo on the sound. It's in a small room, it's dry, and it's naked as it's possible to be.
The ultimate personal statement.
Yeah, that's probably what it is for me. This was how to make something out of a non-creative situation, the illness being the non-creative thing, and making it mean something bigger than anything I had done before by not thinking of the previous approach. You know, most people are stuck with their history and they're always competing with themselves. And this was being born again.
Yes, reinventing your not your past, but reinventing the present.
Yeah, as though I had no past. There was no previous method in this. Only my love for these songs and my enjoyment of that particular instrument. But the illness, what that did, for all the negative implications, which are too numerous to mention, and the unknowns in the future, I think having done this one recording almost makes it worthwhile, as strange as that sounds.
Okay, so this is part 3. The melody at night with you. And I don't know if it's too bright. So the melody at night with you is the name of the album that they were just talking about. The first song on there is I Loves You, Porgy. I got it bad and that ain't good. Don't ever leave me. Someone to watch over me, my wild Irish rose. Blame it on my youth. Something to remember you by, I believe it is. Be My Love, Shenandoah, I'm Through with Love. I'm actually going to listen to this again tonight. I enjoy this album because it's the ballad, kind of vibe to it, especially starting off at I Love You, Porgy. I did not know that Keith Jarrett was dealing with the chronic fatigue syndrome. I knew he was dealing with a number of things, like his expression of playing, if you've never watched him, is so expressive that he's literally standing up at the piano, stooping under it, like he just is all over the place, and it's funny to watch, it's fun to watch, I love it, except for the fact that he was pretty hard on his body. So I knew that he had to do some chiropractor work and that his body was kind of messed up from doing all that, but I didn't know he suffered from chronic fatigue syndrome. So what I'm going to do is, there's a New York Times article, and I'm not going to read this entire article now because I was looking at the length of it, and I'm going to actually do it as my very next video. I'm going to do the Keith Jarrett, still battling an illness. Jarrett ends his silence, and I'll just read this first paragraph. 2 years ago, Keith Jarrett found himself, as he put it, completely drained of energy midway through a concert tour of Italy. It wasn't one of the short-lived spells of exhaustion with which touring musicians are often afflicted, but something far more drastic. I don't know what fuel I was using to do those concerts, he recalled, but I felt as if aliens had entered my body and that perhaps it would be the last time I'd be able to play. At the last concert, I actually played a dirge for myself. As it turned out, Mr. Jarrett had it almost right when he imagined himself under assault by an alien force. He was suffering from the effects of an interstitial bacterial parasite, one of the various conditions whose debilitating symptoms are collectively known as chronic fatigue syndrome. Unable to summon enough energy to cross the street, let alone give any more of the wildly passionate solo recitals that have made him one of the most popular and admired jazz pianists of the post-war era, he canceled all his concert dates, withdrew to his home in rural New Jersey, and began a rigorous course of medical treatment. A full year went by before he was able to play again, and his appearance at the New Jersey Performing Arts Center in Newark on Saturday will mark the first time he has performed in the public since the fall of 1996. Now, this article, the reason why somebody's probably like, will mark the first time? Well, I say will. Well, this article was written November 8th, 1998. So I didn't know they dealt with this, and I didn't know that the Melody at Night with You came around this time. So I really have respect for that album on a whole different level, because I mean, I love the album and I had no idea what he was dealing with, as well as what he just explained about the way that the piano was tuned and that kind of thing, how it's just tuned just right for it to sound like a human voice where he didn't have to do much. So now this is another one of those things, why I enjoy music, because it has a lot to do with opening up your perception. I mean, just from knowing those two things, now when I listen to it, my perception of it goes deeper, my experience of it goes deeper, and I understand it even more. I understand his artistry even more. If he grunts and groans, I understand it even more. He got a damn right to grunt and groan. He's like going through, one of the roughest times while he's playing some of the most beautiful music for us. So it's really interesting, and so Mark Huckenberger says, where is this interview from? So Mark, if you're still watching, this is the 1999 interview with Doug Watson. And actually, the interview, I'm going to actually post in the chat. In fact, I could probably do it now while we're talking. But this is from that interview. And what I'm going to do is share with you the first link, and it's going to automatically take you to the other links, man. So thank you so much for asking that question. And nice to meet you too, bro. I think this might be the first time we met. So pleasure to meet you. I hope that you enjoy. Oh, it doesn't allow me. So I'm going to come back and post to your comment and drop the link. So yeah, that takes my respect to another level. Keith Jarrett became my hero on another level just now, and so yeah. Here we go. Let's go ahead to video number 4, part 3 of 4. And here we go. The last 3 minutes and 30 seconds. Let's see what Keith has to say. So this is the trio. Yay. I love his trio, by the way. I have my own trio as well. Keith Jarrett trio definitely has an effect on my trio, which is called Aaron Hill Trio, and a big impact, big influence. In fact, this trio started around my love for jazz standards, and because of where my approach is, very much like Keith. Here we go.
What are your plans and the trio's plans for the future?
Well, we don't ever plan anything. That's why we're still together. We don't plan to be together, so we could be together forever then.
How much rehearsal time is necessary?
Well, we never rehearsed until I got sick. And then the only reason we rehearsed was because I wasn't sure how I would do, if I'd have a relapse, which is exactly what happened.
I recently read in Downbeat magazine that you're reassessing your playing style, investigating more of a bebop approach?
Well, due to my protracted illness, which by no means am I out of the woods of, well, that was great English, I know. I had to stop playing, and when I stopped playing, I listened to my old recordings when I finally didn't hate music 100% of the time. I think you could probably imagine that if you didn't know if you'd ever play again, and all you had was what you already did, you start to immediately see how much you dislike most of it. So I thought, well, if I ever do play again, there's various things I hope to not do or do differently. So that's why that happened. And when the trio finally started to rehearse again, we had long talks about it, and it took a little while to sink into Jack and Gary exactly what it was I was talking about. In the playing, they figured it out. It's just a little bit of a coming off the weighty end of the sound. I decided I wouldn't play To the Halls anymore. as though we were anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I was so flexible, and so were Gary and Jack, that we could play almost any place, even if other bands couldn't manage it. We would just change everything we did. I noticed when I listened to the recordings, which are mostly live, that we're playing hard, and I knew the reason was that we were filling these large halls.
You're trying to project to the back row of,
Right.
of audience.
Right. And
yeah.
I thought, that's not really what I hear.
Mm-hmm.
And my little studio here is so small that when we rehearsed, I knew right away what I wanted to change. I wasn't playing out, I was playing into the music instead of out to the room.
He said a lot there. Wasn't playing into the music, but out to the room. In fact, let me make sure I quoted that correctly.
I wasn't playing actually what I hear. And my little studio here is so small that when we rehearsed, I knew right away what I wanted to change. I wasn't playing out, I was playing into the music instead of out to the room.
Absolutely love it. You know, so one thing that I'm enjoying about, listening to Keith Jarrett interviews is that I've been having a really interesting conversation lately, with a few people, and I'm curious to find out more where this comes from. First of all, hello to Mario Alexandre. Thanks for hanging out, brother. Happy Monday to you. So I've been having a conversation, and this conversation is around whether Keith Jarrett is a nice person or not. And so it's interesting because a number of people that I've talked to that actually, I would say, I feel probably have, as much as I'm familiar with Keith and have listened to so much of his music, and I mean, it's in me. They feel like Keith's an asshole. And essentially what I'm saying is they say that, he's very, very picky, very, very let's say obsessive compulsive. If there's one person talking, he won't play, and he said he talks to the audience, and he's kind of stern, and is a bit of a perfectionist. Now, I guess I could see that because he has both classical and jazz background, and his pedagogy, his foundation of his style, I mean, is really meticulous. So I could see him with the classical teacher who had the ruler hitting his hands, maybe, or something like that. I had to find that about his history, find out how he grew up as far as lesson. But it's so interesting because at the same time, when I listen to his music, I hear playfulness and freedom. I hear non-attachment. I hear detachment. I hear a person who is free, who is much like me, an easygoing person who doesn't need things to be a certain way and is not overly perfectionist. I guess this depends on who you ask, but I'm a pretty easygoing person. I mean, there are times when at concerts, if someone's phone rings, I'll hurry up and learn the song and play it back. So just different personalities. But it does show that you can have different personalities and still play, the same heartfelt music. But I just always found it interesting because I'm like, Keith Jarrett does not seem like an asshole. I don't think so. I would love to meet him one day. Milton, brother, I want to throw this. See this phone, man? It's connected to my computer, and I still want to just throw it at the screen and break the screen. No, I don't. Bro, you were great today, man. I really enjoyed your playing. You and that cajon player, y'all were jamming, man. You sound so good, bro. I really, really enjoyed you. And yeah, man, if you get a chance, drop me a line. I'm ready to chop it up with you on my podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, I have some great people on my podcast, and if you haven't heard it, it's the Aaron Hill Podcast. You can Google it everywhere. And so I'm looking forward to having this brother, another musician, friend, piano player, just a great all-around brother, Milton Mushana. Where are you from, bro? I forgot where you're from, man. Drop a line. Hey, no problem. Milton says, thanks a lot, bro. Much appreciated. It is all good. Nicole says true facts. Yeah, Keith Jarrett. Keith is my number one. You know, he's just my number one. And I have to say that out of everybody that's impacted my style, I would say that Keith Jarrett definitely has impacted me the deepest. I mean, you know, I've had a few times where people have mistaken me for Keith as far as just what they were overhearing, or they would come up to me right after the concert and they would go, "You're a Keith Jarrett fan," and I'm always honored because, you know, my goal isn't to sound like him, and I don't think that sound exactly like him. I think I sound like Aaron Hill, but you can definitely hear his impact on my style, and I've had, you know, impact, you know, by Chick Corea and Herbie Hancock and Oscar Peterson and Robert Glasper and, you know, a whole host of people. But I have to say Keith has had the biggest impact on what you hear when you come out of my when listening to my style, and the way I approach melodies, the way I approach harmonies, the way I sing, even with my playing or even through my playing, the way I phrase and my pauses, and it kind of blows my mind, to be honest. But shout out to my college jazz teacher, wherever you are in the world or in the country of Ghana. Shout out to you, my friend, because he really, really helped me out, and he would just say over and over to me, "Aaron, you just have to listen. You just have to listen, listen." And all he was saying was that just submerge your ears into the music, and you will become the music, and you'll figure out some of these things that analytically, you're like, at that time, I was a very analytical musician. I'm glad I put that on pause, because if y'all heard that belch, you might not have came back to my channel just now. But I was a musician who was very much, I was very smart. I was also very analytical. I came from a mentor that had a little sign on his desk when you walked in, and it said "pluck with a purpose." And his whole deal was that if you put your hands on the keyboard, then you ought to know what you're playing. You ought to know the names of the chords. You ought to know these things. So it was really helpful. You know, from a theory standpoint, couldn't ask for better. But on the flip side, it also made me over analytical, and I couldn't make music in a way that I had before, which was just by feeling and allowing my heart to lead me. So, you know, things took on a different shape. And it was a while before I got back to being able to just flow freely like that. I was glad eventually when I did. But, you know, Keith Jarrett really hits me in that way where, you know, you could just really feel his music, and it goes past theory. Milton is from Zimbabwe. Yes, sir. I love it, brother. Crystal Gibson, thanks so much for hanging out. I appreciate you all. Who here has never heard of Keith Jarrett? If you haven't, raise your hand. Just throw your hand up or put a little wave in there. If you haven't heard of Keith Jarrett, you should definitely check him out. And like I said, if you've heard me play, then you heard a bit of Keith, because even if I tried to, I couldn't hide the fact that he has such a big impact on my style. My latest recording is called The Serenade, Volume 12. Excuse me. Hold on one second, peeps. Had to have a clear my throat moment, drinking my H2O. So my newest project is called The Serenade, Volume 12. And I am actually going to put this in the chat while you all are there. Now, I have to say that with this project, I was like, wow. Yeah. Well, I might be his son because he has such a big impact on my style. When I did my my first serenade last year on my birthday, April 28th, one of my good friends said to me afterwards, she came up to me and said, "Wow, I really felt like I was in the Cone concert." And I was just like, whoa. I mean, I almost didn't know how to take that. Because Because I'm like, whoa, I mean, that is just only one of the most classic concerts of all damn time. And thank you. I am honored. I am absolutely honored. So, yeah, peoples. What I'm going to do is I wanted to paste my, I tell you what, I'll leave it at that. What I'll do is I'm going to paste my Street Serenades playlist, my YouTube playlist. If you get a chance, please click on this. I want you to see what I've been out here doing in these here streets, as they say. Not streets, streets. SKREETS. So I'm going to put a little message in the chat that says Street Serenades with a little piano by it, and you'll be able to tell what it is. If you can, I'd love for you to click on that. Check out what I've been doing out here in these streets during quarantine. I've been having a lot of fun outside, taking my music to the community, spreading it around, giving people good vibes, just through hearing some good music for their day, and just, in a surprise way. So I have done over 100 of these experiences now in Baltimore City, and I can't explain how happy it makes me to bring this level of love and light to my community, especially during the roughest time in our human history. I have so much empathy for everybody that's been impacted, in great or small ways. So, but that is my reaction video on Keith Jarrett, the Doug Watson interview. If you get a chance, go check it out. Drop a line, and yeah, look out for the next video, because it means a lot to learn about Keith's life. And I'm going to go to that other video the article. I'm going to do an article response about his chronic fatigue syndrome. So look out for that, and I'll see you very shortly. Take care, and thanks for hanging out with me. Drop a line. Peace.